Hello, my name is Alberto and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the second video in the Fashion 101 series where I'm going to try to explain a little bit of the basics of fashion and how the whole industry works. I'm going to try and explain it as easily as I can. Hopefully it's going to be understandable for everyone. If you have any questions or something wasn't clear, please let me know in the comments and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So in the first video, I spoke a little bit about fabrics and fibers, where they come from and what they're used for. So fabric, as we said, is the foundation of a garment. You might think of a piece of fabric as being kinda 2D, because it's flat, and unless it's a knit, it doesn't really have stretch. So for example, this has the tiniest amount of stretch in it, but it doesn't really help me when I want to dress a curve. So if we take a body, the body is 3D while the fabric is 2D. So pattern making is a process in which we take the 2D piece and transform it into a 3D one. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we start from a drawing, a fashion sketch, or a garment to copy, an idea. So the easiest way you do that is you take a piece of fabric and a mannequin and you do what is called moulage. Moulage is basically hand making the shape of the garment, which translates to hand making your pattern. And it's still used in couture and one-of-a-kind pieces, but it's not really something that's feasible in an industrial production. So you would take your piece of fabric, line it up with the center, in this case, for example, and pin it to keep it in place. What you want to do basically is create a quarter of the body, in this case, but you can do more pieces or less depending on what the drawing you start from is or what the design is. So what you'll want to do is take the piece of fabric, pin it in some key parts like the center and around the neckline or the collar and the shoulder and the sleeve. So what you can see here is I pinned the piece, but I have some excess fabric. This, again, it's not stretchy, so I cannot really pull it because then I get all these lines that are not very pretty, and I encountered the problem of needing to give a shape to this part. So what usually is done is a dart. So once the side is fixed, you can see this lies nice and flat. What I need to do is get rid of this excess. So what usually would be done is a dart. A dart, it means I'm gonna pin all around this side, which allows me to pull this nice and tight without creating any ripples. Like so. So what I have now is a full-on dart. This obviously would be stitched and it would be on the inside of the garment. So from the outside you will only see a line. What I could do now is go on and mark all my lines, and then I could unpin it and get a sort of rough pattern. Like so. So if now I were to unpin this, now hopefully you'll be able to see, but here we have our waistline, our dart, not a waistline, the side, and we go on to the armhole, shoulder, neckline, center. So that's a super basic pattern that then we would cut, put onto paper to straighten the lines and make sure that everything is nicely done. And this is a very basic pattern. So that was a super easy and quick version of moulage. Obviously, normally it's much more intricate, and you would add in it all the design elements you have, like pleats, ruffles, pockets, closures. All of that would be included in the final one. Now, for industrial production, obviously moulage is not the best technique because it takes a lot of time and it's not the most efficient. So over the years, different pattern makers developed different methods. These methods, that are still taught in school nowadays, allow you, using geometry, to create a pattern without a mannequin, fabric, straight up lines on paper. So you'll have a series of formulas and proportions that allow you to get a very correct pattern, and they allow you to trace what usually is called a base on paper. From that base, then, based on the sketch, you can add and modify all the parts that you want to get to the final design. So what is a base? A base is a pattern with no design to it. You can imagine the super basic dress, a basic t-shirt, a basic shirt or pants. Everything has a base. Normally a company or a pattern maker would have their own bases, and they can use them for whatever they want. A design is usually made on one size only to begin with, so you would take your base of a dress, for example, and then you can do the modifications you need to the sleeve, to the neckline, to the length and hem, to the fit. You can add pockets, closures, all sort of things. Nowadays, companies use digital pattern making. There's different programs that are similar to the ones used in architecture or industrial design that use vectors, and they are used to make patterns very, very quickly. Another thing that can be done is to take paper patterns and translate those into the vector program. Once you have made your first pattern, what you will want to do is make a toile. A toile is basically a sample of the garment you just made the pattern of, because you will want to see if the fit is right, is there any issues or parts that don't look good and need to be modified, or also if you want to move some lines or seams, for example. Basically just to give you an idea of what it would look like once it's translated into the final fabric. The toile is usually made with a cheaper fabric, but it's still very similar to the final one. That's because you want the fabric to act the same way. If I were to make a t-shirt and I made the toile with a non-stretchy fabric, obviously I couldn't see the problems that I could have with the final fabric, because they act in a completely different way. Once the toile is done, I would see if there's any new modifications to do and possibly make a second or even a third one, depending on how it goes. Once everyone is completely happy with the result, then all the modifications are translated onto the pattern and the pattern is complete. The next step for production is size grading. So when you make a pattern, you make it in one specific size. Usually it's the one of the model or the client. That's because it allows you to try on for fit issues and check that everything is alright. Obviously after that, if you want to make a production, you'll have to scale the pattern onto all the different sizes that you have. Every company has their own size chart that they established over the years. The difference between each size is calculated and divided, so it could be spread out in all the parts of the pattern, so that every size can get an increase or a decrease and still keep the same proportion of the original one. So usually you get more of a difference in width than in length, etc., etc. After the grading is done, seam allowance are added. Seam allowance is basically an extra bit of fabric all over each piece that allows the seamstress to join them together, and they're going to remain on the inside of the garment. Every type of seam requires a different amount of seam allowance, and it's going to depend also on the type of fabric. Once that is done, the pattern is finally ready to be cut and put together to reach the final garment. So hopefully this video was interesting and useful for you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Like and subscribe, it would be a great help for me. And I'll see you next week with another video. Have a great day. Bye!